Great Pretender is a 2020 original anime from Wit Studio and Netflix, following the antics of a righteous band of international con artists, travelling the globe and swindling the ill-gotten gains of various crime lords and scumbags in fantastic locations and with even more fantastic scams. The anime strikes a great tone between cool and comedic, with lots of visual flair and character-driven moments, but always remembering not to take itself too seriously, allowing for a lot of humour and some truly outlandish schemes. The vibe of the series reminded me a lot of Cowboy Bebop, both in its international flavour featuring characters from all over the world and a bunch of real-life locations, feeling like the show was made by a team with a particular ear towards Western cinema and music, featuring a bunch of tracks that sounded like they could be lifted directly from Bebop, but also in the core dynamics of its central characters. The main crew consists of this ragtag bunch of troubled and not entirely trustworthy individuals, who, despite clearly carrying a lot of their own personal baggage, have formed this unlikely and dysfunctional found family unit. You'd never get them to admit it, but you get a sense that none of them could really exist apart from the others for any significant amount of time, and yet, like the crew of the Bebop, somehow together they manage to thrive. Main character and self-proclaimed greatest con man in Japan, Makoto, gets adopted by this group after being duped by their ever-aloof leader, Laurent, who Makoto thought he was scamming. As the pair head to LA to cheat a sleazy Hollywood director out of his millions, we meet the rest of the crew in sultry 40-something Cynthia and Abby, the resident badass with no sense of self-preservation. Over the course of their first caper, we learn of Makoto's troubled background and how he was forced into a life of crime while trying to care for his ill mother, after the world turned its back on him following unsettling revelations about his dad. The way that Great Pretender gets us to care about its main quartet is really simple, but really satisfying. The main narrative is broken into 4 chapters, each one centered around a specific con in a specific city with a specific mark, and most importantly, centered around a specific main character. The surface story is always moving at 100 miles an hour, with an endless string of double crosses, improvised saves, and new layers being added to the scam. It works to keep your attention and make sure that there is never a dull moment, but never gets lost in its own intricacy. All the scams are elaborate but follow a line of logic that's easy enough to follow, allowing them to be chaotic without being confusing. In each of the 4 chapters, running underneath the main con is a series of revelations related to the designated character, which not only tie into the scam at hand, but help to explain why that character is the way that they are, recontextualizing tragic traits which up until now we'd only viewed with comedy or excitement through the carefree lens of the main plot. Creating a definite separation between how we first interpret these characters and how they became who they are gets us invested by giving us a sense that we understand them more than the world around them, who only ever get to see that surface layer. It's not always perfect. For Makoto in particular, I think the separation between the unruly, embittered con artist we see in his backstory and the screaming, flabbergasted novice we see in his interactions with the crew feel like 2 different people. But for the most part, I think that the grounded backstories work excellently alongside the more ludicrous scams, fleshing out the characters in a way that doesn't grind the fast-paced narrative to a screeching halt. And without giving anything away, it seems like the story has enough left in the tank to keep fleshing out the characters in this style without running out of ideas. That idea of not interrupting the pace of the main plot is important because it allows Great Pretender to keep up a level of irreverence which stops it from taking itself too seriously. Without that pace and without that humour, the show wouldn't be nearly as captivating to watch, and the more you see of it, the more you realise that the plans and the schemes are there to alleviate from the darker aspects of these characters, not the other way around. I'm generally not a fan of the 4D chess master type of character who's always 10 steps ahead of everyone else, because I feel like more often than not, they're used for cheap, convenient writing from writers who aren't quite as smart as they think they are. Laurent is 100% that type of character, but why I feel he works here is because there's always that level of humour that means that you're not supposed to take his plans that seriously. They're supposed to be ridiculous. That's part of the charm. But again though, this isn't without fault. The sheer absurdity of some of Laurent's plans means that the show does rob itself of some dramatic tension. Whenever a plan goes drastically wrong, you immediately assume that it's part of a fake out because it isn't the type of story to commit to anything too horrific happening. And, you know, I get it that fake twists and turns are part of the genre, but it does get a little bit eye-rolling after the third or fourth time that you call out the show's bluff. To summarise though, Great Pretender is well worth the watch. It's got a ton of charm, visually, musically and narratively. For the record, I watched the show with its English dub and the voice work was really solid. Kausa Mohammed in particular nails her character. Even if you don't love Great Pretender, I think you'll at least be entertained by it. It's got 20-minute episodes and they just whiz by, and what's more, each one ends with a little bit of Freddie Mercury, so I mean, what's not to like? Thanks for watching. Great Pretender is a really fun show, so I do mean it when I recommend watching it. I'm still experimenting with these less formal review type videos in between the more in-depth essay stuff, so if you want to show some support for the channel, I'm sure by now you know where the nice buttons are underneath the video. And until next time, thanks.